and today is our very last video for the #Darebin Backyard Harvest Series. So you can scroll back through all the videos we've done over the last 2 months. We've talked about everything from bees to chooks to winter gardening projects, and today, one of my favorite topics, which is preparing the garden for spring. So it might not feel like it on a day like today. I know I planned to do this video out in the garden, and instead it's been raining pretty heavily here. So it might not feel like it today, but now is a great time to plan for spring, to think about what are the things you can do in your garden now and over the coming few months so that you can have a fantastic spring-summer harvest. Because if you're new to gardening, it's a good way to think about it that Melbourne kind of has two major seasons for growing when it comes to all things annual vegetables. Your cool season across autumn and winter, and spring and summer, your warm season, which is where you can grow a lot of people's favorite homegrown veg. So think about your zucchinis, your cucumbers, your tomatoes, your eggplants. All of those are your warm season crops where the plants need a lot of solar energy in order to grow these great big fruit. So let's talk a little bit about preparing your garden for spring. And I would really encourage anyone who's watching, go ahead and add your questions here in the comments below and I'll address them during the video. Any fruit or veg that you've had trouble growing, any problems you've been experiencing in your garden or with your compost, post them here and I'll address them as the questions come up. So let's talk first about things that you can do now in the garden. So some good skills and things to be thinking about at the moment are, of course, fruit tree pruning. There are two main times to prune your fruit trees here in Melbourne. One is in summer, if you're constraining its growth, and one is in winter, if you're creating the shape you want for the tree and encouraging it to grow new limbs. If you prune when the tree is dormant in winter, it's going to come into spring and go, oh, I've got to get growing as soon as that weather warms up. So if you're looking to continue giving your tree some shape, go ahead and teach yourself some fruit tree pruning skills. We actually did a video on that, so just scroll back over the last 2 months if you're interested in learning more. It's also the time of year to add new fruit trees to your garden. So across winter, deciduous trees go into dormancy. They lose their leaves, they're a little bit happier to be dug up and moved around, and so it's a great time to be able to buy new stock at the nursery. If you're looking to add some new trees to your garden, maybe you want some apples in there, maybe you want some peaches, you can buy bare root fruit trees from the nursery at this time of year and in the next month or so, where you're able to access trees where you can see right into their roots and make sure that they're healthy and ready to go into the ground. So if you think you might want to add some new deciduous trees, make that decision now and start preparing the ground. Add lots of organic matter like compost, and you'll be ready to go when you buy your trees. It's also a great time to grab yourself some free fruit trees, and my absolute favorite, particularly if you live in Darebin, because there's a lot of these around, is a fig tree. So you can see there, that's a beautiful, I think, Black Genoa variety of fig. So figs strike incredibly easily. They're a very easy tree to take a cutting of and create a new tree, which will be identical to that parent tree. So if you've sampled a fig around your neighborhood or in a friend's backyard that you love the taste of, go ahead and take a cutting that's of a branch that's gone into dormancy, just a couple of nodes down, that's those knotty things that you see on the branch. Stick them in some soil, keep them moist, keep them in a kind of half shade area, and those will strike and start to grow in spring. I've taken a lot of cuttings from fig trees and tried to grow them this way around this time of year. Usually I would take them about a month from now rather than right now, so right before they burst into action in spring. And I've had a hit rate of about 80%. So about 80% of them have turned into successful little fig trees. So give it a go, take a whole bunch of cuttings, stick them in the ground, and you might have a fig tree for yourself and a few friends for free come springtime. Some other things to consider in your garden right now are perennials that you might want to add other than fruit trees. So across winter, when things go into dormancy, the perennials, it's a great time to add them into the garden. So you might not recognize these just from their roots, but here we have asparagus, rhubarb, and artichoke. All three are fantastic perennials that grow year after year in your garden. Rhubarb you buy as crowns at this time of year, and you can also buy asparagus and artichoke at this time of year and keep them growing for many, many years. So consider whether or not there's a space for them in your garden over the next month. The same is true of getting strawberries started. Now is a great time to consider them. Some other things that I've mentioned before, so I won't go into too much detail. Check out the video last week on winter gardening projects. But some things to think about now are What containers do you want to grow out of come spring when you're planting things up in, say, between August and December? Are there any projects you can do to create trellises in your garden? So think about, for example, if you have a smaller space, creating a trellis system on your fence line. I did this when I had a long, skinny backyard, and it added an extra 11 meters of growing space, which I could use for things like cucumbers, tromboncinos, tomatoes, beans, all across that spring-summer season. So it can add a lot of room to be growing up and not just across your garden. Another thing to do at this time of year is to get started with composting and worm farming. It's a little bit slower at this time of year to be composting and worm farming because it's not as warm, but that doesn't mean that it's not very valuable. If you get going now, come summertime maybe, your compost might be cooked and ready to go, and you'll be able to top up the garden ready for next cool season. So if you get started with those two, remember you're producing a free resource right on your property, and there is nothing better. So now's the time. Another decision to consider right now is whether or not you could add some stock animals to your backyard. I am a big fan of closing the loop by having somebody who's eating tasty treats out of my kitchen and turning them into eggs, as well as being self-sufficient in honey. So spring is the season when you would add new stock animals to your garden because that's when they themselves are breeding. So for example, bees, that's something that you would add to your garden in about November, December maybe. Chickens and quails. Again, they slow down their laying over wintertime. It's harder to get chickens and quails at this time of year unless you're, for example, getting them from a backyarder who doesn't want to keep them anymore. So these are great to add in springtime as well. If you think you might want to add some to your system, why not go ahead and get yourself set up now? There's a bit of a steep learning curve with bees, but it's easy from there. And with quails and chickens, not as steep of a learning curve, but a little bit of infrastructure prep to do first. Where are they going to live? How are they going to be contained? We did a video a couple weeks back on poultry and another on bees, so check those out if you're interested in adding any of these guys. Don't forget to add all of your questions in the comments below. I'll be happy to answer them on the video, or I can type answers afterwards as well. Something I want you to think about coming into spring are what are the annuals that actually get to stay in your garden? Because there's some veggies that we grow as annuals in Melbourne, meaning that we grow them for a season, that actually can live for multiple seasons, that they tend to be biennial, or you can keep them going even when it's warm or cool in Melbourne. Everyone's had the experience of a tomato plant lasting a little longer than it was meant to in the Melbourne climate, but two that are classic examples that will keep going for a few seasons if treated right are kale and silver beet. I find that I can keep them going for quite a while here in Melbourne and continue getting a harvest. So keep in mind when you go to clear out your veggie patch ready for the spring crop, actually there are some stuff that can stay in there continuing to grow. Silver beet I find in Melbourne can go for 2 years before you need to dig it up and plant a new one. But usually by then it's self-seeded itself all over the place. So it's good to go. Another thing I want you to think about is how are you going to be planting come springtime? I don't know if you're like me, but I am a little addicted to trying different varieties of vegetables that I can grow in my backyard. One year my mom and I had a tomato competition and grew 32 varieties to see what was our favorite. And as a result of that, I love collecting seeds from friends and from ordering them online, because it would be really expensive if I were buying all of those as punnets of vegetables. But also I find that there aren't the same varieties available at the nursery that I'd like to grow. I like to grow rare varieties of pumpkins and tomatoes and things like that. That means that I have to raise some of my own seeds at home. And doing that early on in the season, getting your tomatoes in really early, can be tough if you don't have a space to grow them. Now, you might be lucky enough that you have a perfect north-facing window that you can raise seeds in the windowsill of. But that's not the case at my house. And so I've required a little bit of a greenhouse in order to create warm temperatures and raise my seeds earlier. You need to make the call for yourself. Are you going to be buying punnets of seedlings, which usually cost about $5 per punnet and you get about 5 plants? Or are you going to be buying a package of seeds, which costs about $5 and keeps you going for a few years, but requires a lot more work on your part? You got to find the soil to grow them in, and you got to keep them warm and moist for a period of time to get them going. If you don't think that you have the dedication for that, or you're newer to gardening, I recommend going for the punnets. Raising seeds is kind of tough. There are some tricks to it. Some grow very, very easily, like zucchini. Some are a little bit trickier to get going, like chilies. So if you're newer to gardening, maybe start with the punnets. But if you're getting a little bit more experienced, a little bit more adventurous, why don't consider this year if you might be adding some sort of greenhouse to your garden to be growing your spring seedlings? If that's the case, there are some people who get going with particular seedlings as early as mid to late July, I've seen. Personally, I really get cracking in August and September. Those are my months for really working in the greenhouse, getting lots of things growing. But you can test the limits of how early you can grow stuff in Melbourne. They used to say that we don't put tomatoes in here until Melbourne Cup Day. Now it looks more like AFL Grand Final Day. So as those dates change with our changing climate and with the capacity we have to offer support to plants, why not test the limits a little earlier? I personally always set an aim of eating a tomato before Christmas, but that means I have to give them a little bit of an extra helping hand early in the season. So, greenhouses come in lots of shapes and forms, all the way up to multi-$1,000 structures, and as simple as an upside-down clear plastic box that you could buy from any sort of store or find in hard rubbish. I recommend checking out some of the suggestions on Gardening Australia, and I'll post a link in the comments below. But why not think about whether you could just have a cheap, easy, secondhand greenhouse that you're able to do some seed raising in. Another trick that I want to teach you about before we go into spring is thinking about crop rotation. Now, that sounds a little bit more complicated than it is, but it's actually straightforward. And I have my friend Tino from Gardening Australia here in an image to help explain it. So Tino here has 4 different beds, which show the 4 groupings of annual vegetables that we like to grow. That's leaves, so things we eat for their leaves, think your lettuces, your silver beets. Legumes, that's your beans, think broad beans across winter, French beans in summer. Fruit, think about your tomatoes, your cucumbers, things that we're growing, that not to eat the leaves, but to eat the fruit that it produces. And roots, think things where you're eating the root system, carrots, beetroots, parsnip. Each of those different groupings of plants does different things to the soil in terms of the nutrients they take up, the nutrients they add back in, and how they actually grow in the soil, how deep their root systems are. So there's a lot of clever scientific thinking about it. You might not follow it really intensely, but this is an idea that basically keeps you rotating different types of vegetables into your garden to keep the soil well fed, to ensure that you don't have the same plant year and year and year after each other in the same bed, which can be problematic. So you don't have to follow this religiously, but it can be a really great idea for following the soil. I have a little explainer video on how crop rotation works, and I'll post that in the comments as well, so look out for that one. But at the very least, if you aren't going to do crop rotation in your garden, I do recommend avoid planting the same family of plants year after year after year in the same bed. The one that everybody hears about is potatoes or tomatoes. And generally, I've seen recommendations that after about 3 years of tomatoes in the same bed, you need to give it a rest. That's because you can get a buildup of things in the soil that are not going to be good for your tomatoes next year. Kind of like the great potato blight that so many people have heard about. So consider if you have had tomatoes in the same bed year after year, see if you can put them somewhere else and rotate something else into that bed. So another thing that I'd love for you to consider when you're doing your planting in spring is staggered planting. Now, have you had this experience? Because it happens to me every year, where you get really excited one weekend, you buy all these punnets, you plant them all in, and then when they're ready to harvest, you are overwhelmed with the vegetable. It's a problem. I don't think anyone has ever gotten started at spring gardening and not ended up giving zucchinis to every neighbor in the street. And so something I recommend is, even when you're feeling excited, try not to plant too much of one thing all at one time. Stagger it across the season. With zucchinis now, I plant one really early. I actually plant one in September and I keep it covered in case there's any cold days. Then I plant another in about October, November, and a third even in December, knowing that I won't get a full season out of it, but that I'm going to be getting zucchinis right from, say, October all the way into well into autumn the next year. Stagger your planting and you'll get a longer harvest and less gluts, where you end up palming off a lot of fruit and veg to the neighbors. Another thing that I'm going to recommend is that you think about right plant, right place, right time, which is a concept I learned from Justin Calverley at Series, and I really like it because it helps you think about your site. What works really well at my site might not work for your site. Maybe mine's a little bit colder, or for example, has more limited sun. If you have a backyard that has really limited sun, chilies, eggplants, not really for you. You might be growing instead some leafy greens. So know your site, know the sun requirements that the plants have, and then choose the right plants for that site. That's the most important thing to consider. It's really great to see some questions coming through. Thank you for sending those. I see Anita, thanks, has asked, hi, I'm interested to know if lemon tree needs a trim. Great question, Anita. A lot of people do wonder about when to prune their citrus trees. And this is actually quite a controversial question because it not only has to do with whether or not you're shaping the tree, but whether you're having issues like citrus gall wasp, which is a problem that a lot of Melburnians experience. It's when it gets those horrible little knots all through the branches, which is actually the eggs growing into tiny little wasps. So this is a more complicated question that I'll get into in a lot of detail in this video, but I'm going to post a suggestion, which is from Leaf Root and Fruit about whether or not to prune your citrus. But a lot of that depends on the age of the citrus and also the problems that you're experiencing. So let me know more details in the comments. If anyone else has spring gardening questions, please do post them. So I wanted to speak quickly about some of my favorite things to grow across the warm season, and just to get you really, really excited for that period. So tomatoes, I mentioned before that one year my mom and I grew 32 different varieties. I've been asked before what the winners were, and I'm happy to share that for my mom, the winner was Beam's Yellow Pear. It's a digger's favorite variety that lots of people grow. I think that they're really zesty and nice. And for me, it was actually a variety called Blueberries, which true to name is kind of a bluey purpley tomato. And I felt that the plant was really, really productive and really tasty tomatoes. With a lot of taste testers, that was the one that came out on top, the variety Blueberries. So tomatoes, as I mentioned before, the old logic was we don't put them in the ground in Melbourne until Cup Day, but now that seems to be changing. People are getting them in earlier. And as I mentioned, year on year, I'm able to eat tomatoes before Christmas, so long as I get them in the ground early and keep them protected from any frosts. Something I would recommend if your site is a little bit more constrained for light, or if you're a newbie grower, is to start with cherry tomatoes instead of beefsteaks or really big tomatoes. Cherries are a little easier to grow and you're likely to have more success. I've even found cherries better for situations where rats are out of control and doing a lot of munching because they're less likely to get to every tomato and ruin it if you have that situation. So another thing that I grow across spring and summer that I wanted to mention, and I'm about to blow somebody's mind, is capsicums. But I have some news. If you've ever been to the store and seen the green, the yellow, and the red capsicums and thought, oh, I'll get a couple of these different varieties, they're not different varieties. They are the same plant, and the capsicum's being harvested at different stages in its ripeness. It starts as green, goes to yellow, it turns red. So that might sound ridiculous to some gardeners, but whenever I run this workshop in person, somebody goes, oh my God, how have I not known this all my life? It's just different stages of ripeness of the capsicum. So lucky you, if you grow one plant at home, you'll get to see all three. You can harvest it at any color you want. But really you're getting jibbed if you buy green, because that capsicum hasn't yet received all the DNA of its mother plant. It's not quite as nutritious and flavorsome as a red capsicum. Capsicums are a plant that are a little bit difficult to grow from seed, like chilies. They can be quite difficult to grow from seed. So I recommend, if you're a newbie gardener, buying them as a little punnet to give you a red hot crack. And they're one that is a little bit more cold sensitive than others. So make sure that you get them in with some support from frost, and hopefully we have a long enough warm season that you're able to get a good harvest out of them. Capsicum and chili plants, if well protected in Melbourne, can last into a second year and be even more productive in that second year. Depends where you live in terms of how bad the frosts get. For example, I've been able to keep chili plants alive really well across 2 years in Northcote or Reservoir. My mom living in Warrandyte, where the temperature variability is about an extra 2 degrees, her chili plants tend to die across the winter. So if you live somewhere where you think you can keep them warm, keep them on into that second year and you might get an even better harvest. I see another question coming through, so thanks, Kat. She thinks possums are eating her strawberry and blueberry plants. I think the passion fruit might be next. How do I put them off? A perennial question, Kat, and what a bummer. Once possums get in there, it's really tough. So I think the first thing that you do whenever you have a pest problem is try and identify your pest. Is it rats and mice or is it possums? Because I do find sometimes people are surprised by what the problem is. Possums are a really tricky one because, of course, we don't want to be trapping them in the same way that some people are willing to trap and kill rats and mice as an invasive species. But what I've found with possums that's quite helpful is they can be a little bit put off by things that seem threatening. So I've heard some people talk about For example, predator urine around the garden. And I actually found I used to foster greyhounds. So when they first came off the track, they'd come and live at my house. And after I had greyhounds in the yard, I did not have any more possums coming. I think that just had to do with them kind of being around the yard, as well as them peeing all over the yard and maybe not smelling as friendly to possums. And I've heard a trick that some people hang blood and bone, which is usually a fertilizer. They put it in little tights and they hang it in their trees and find that that scares away the possums. I don't know how comprehensive that actually works, but it's worth a go. I would do anything to get rid of possums. A third suggestion that some people have is to try and keep your possums interested in what's around the outside of the garden so they don't come in. When I lived in Northcote, I had a great big fig tree that was along the fence. The possums would get into that, they'd get their fill, and they never actually came down into the garden. They just got their fill of the figs. Fine with me, I was happy to share. So it might be an idea that you try and get something that they're interested in along the fence line and not in the garden. My most controversial suggestion actually comes from Justin Calverley. He suggested this on radio, and he's one of the teachers at Series who I've learned a lot from. He actually, for a long time, was offering some tasty treats on the fence line to the possums. So for example, some leftover fruit bits, hoping they would get their fill and not come into the garden. I don't know that I can endorse it. It is a good controversial gardening opinion, but I thought I'd give you the spread of what people are saying out and about. All right, I want to talk about a few other vegetables across spring, summer, but do keep those questions coming. So the next I actually wanted to talk about was cucumbers. Cucumbers, you can get different varieties that are either bushing or vining. That's the same with zucchini, and this is a point I really want to emphasize because it might affect which one you grow in your garden. A bushing variety means you're going to get a bush and the plants are just going to grow around that inside. A vining variety means it's going to climb up a trellis and you'll get zucchinis or cucumbers all the way along it. If you don't have a lot of space, a bushing variety is probably going to work for you. The same if you're trying to grow one of these in a pot. A bushing variety is going to work better than a vining one. But if, like me, you've created a lot of trellises, things to grow up, then that's going to work really well with vining varieties because then you're able to just use vertical space and not horizontal space. So most cucumbers come as a vining variety. Zucchini, the vining varieties are usually tromboncino is one, which is kind of halfway between a zucchini and a pumpkin. And there are a few other varieties that you can find that kind of do a little bit of vining. So consider what might work best for your space. But certainly if you are new to gardening, I cannot recommend zucchinis and cucumbers highly enough as something to try. Zucchinis in particular, it's really hard to go wrong with them if you get them in the right time of year. You will certainly be eating enough zucchinis, and they can come in lots of fun colors. My stepsister is a big grower and she loves the golden variety. So that's all she grows now because you can't get them at the store, but they look beautiful growing on your bushes. So a bit of fun that way. Another one that people love to grow, another two vines in Melbourne are watermelons and pumpkins. So pumpkins I want to focus on for a second because I only ever see about 3 varieties in the grocery stores, but my goodness, there are some beautiful varieties that you can grow at home. I recommend looking up pumpkins like Lakota. We posted a picture of one that my mother-in-law grew just a couple days ago, as well as Turk's Turban, Pennsylvania Dutch. There's some fantastic varieties of pumpkins that your kids will marvel at, your neighbors will marvel at, and you can impress all of your friends. So why not try growing something that you can't buy at the store? Pumpkins are one where you're going to get it in very early in the season and you're going to let them grow all the way until the vine dies off in autumn next year. Depending on the plant, you might get 6 pumpkins, you might get 13, and then you're able to store those for a long period of time. So a fantastic crop that you can grow and then be able to be eating across winter when there's less things coming out of the garden. So definitely give them a go. My hot tip with pumpkins to get you going is that they're going to turn into a great big vine that goes off in all directions, and it can be really hard to find your root system where you started the plant. That means your watering's not very effective. You only need to water at that root system. So what I do when I plant a pumpkin in is I put a little stake in so I know exactly where the start of the plant is, and that's the only place that I water. It stops you from watering all over the place, watering your leaves, which can cause powdery mildew, and wasting water as well. So mark where you start your pumpkin out as my hot tip. Another is if you live somewhere that's a little bit colder, just a couple degrees colder than inner Melbourne, or even you have some really constrained space, don't grow great big pumpkins like Queensland Blue because they won't be able to have a full season, and they're going to be too big for a small space. Instead, try growing something like Weeby Little or Lakota, or Potty Marin is my absolute favorite for a small space. They're about this big, and they have this beautiful chestnutty flavor inside, just a beautiful little orange pumpkin that's very popular in France. So for a smaller space, consider a smaller pumpkin, and you're likely to have great success. So I'm conscious that I've been speaking for a long time, but a few other things that you might consider adding across spring and summer would be beans. Now there's lots and lots of different varieties of beans, but I recommend checking out the difference between some of the typical beans that you could grow across spring, summer, and 7-year beans, which are actually a variety that grows perennially. They go for many years, and they'll come back year after year, producing just a little bit less than the annual varieties. I find beans are one of the most underrated veggies to grow at home. They're actually great for your soil. They don't take up a lot of space because they grow vertically up a trellis, and can be enormously productive. There are even beans that start out beautiful waxy white colors, and even purple varieties that turn green when you cook them, and nothing impresses kids more than when you're able to pick something off the vine that's purple and have it magically turn green inside the pot. So check those out. Another one that I recommend, and Kat mentioned before that she does have a passion fruit at her house. Passion fruits grow actually really well in Melbourne so long as they don't get too cold in their first year. They're a short-lived perennial, which means that they're going to produce beautifully for you for about 5 years, anywhere between 3 to 7. And year on year, they're going to increase the number of passion fruits they produce. This year, my mom got over 200 passion fruits from her vine here in Warrandyte, which she was really pleased with. And I think it would have been even more if some of the critters hadn't gotten to them. So I think passion fruit is a great one. You would put it in your garden in about October, and then you just need to do a little prune on it once a year when spring starts. A very easy plant to cover, to take care of. It is a little water hungry, not appropriate for a pot in most cases. But if you have an ugly fence at your yard, if you have a shed that you could grow something over the top of, passion fruit's a winner. Check that one out for your garden. My other suggestion on here is lettuce. Lettuce grows year-round in Melbourne and is a very easy crop to grow, particularly if you don't have a whole lot of sunlight in your apartment, or sorry, in your courtyard or garden. Lettuce, for a lot of people, is something they grow more in winter because you've got a longer period to harvest before it bolts to seed. But if you have a shadier patch in your garden that only gets half sun in spring, summer, lettuce is the way to go. And you'll see in my picture here, there's actually lots and lots of different colors, varieties of lettuce. And I have heard some people say, and have had the experience, that some of the red-leaved lettuce can last a little bit longer in the heat before it bolts in the sun. So have a look and see if you're able to get a variety of lettuce that suits your climate a little bit better. And something else I recommend is, unlike in the store where you're buying the whole head of lettuce, it's just been cut out of the ground and taken away, at home you can treat lettuce like a cut and come again vegetable. So just take the leaves you need and it's going to keep growing and keep growing. So you should get a whole bunch of harvests out of it instead of just one when you cut the head off. So lettuce is definitely on my hot tip list. I'm just going to go ahead and suggest 2 more things, and then I'm conscious of time, so I'll have to get off. But if anyone on here has some questions, post them just there in the comments section. I'll address them here on the video, or I'll type an answer to you afterwards. So the last 2 things that I wanted to talk about are herbs and radishes. Herbs are fantastic to start no matter the time of year. A lot of herbs are perennial. They're going to grow year on year. Think your sage, your rosemary, your oregano. And then some of them are annuals. They're going to grow for a season and die. Coriander, basil. Starting a herb patch that has those perennial herbs at any time of year is great, and then you can add in your specific spring, summer herbs come the warm season. So basil is one that you're going to wait until spring to plant out. You could be self-sufficient in herbs, and you should be. Forget buying the plastic packaging at the store with the herbs in it. You can grow your own, I guarantee it. They are very easy to grow. Even if you have limited sunlight, herbs can be successful in your space. Hopefully you have more than 3 hours of sunlight a day, preferably more than 4, and you will be able to grow these. So definitely give that a go. I would love if you could post in the comments any favorite herbs you have to grow at home, ones that you found quite easy. Personally, I have found that if someone has trouble watering and keeping up with it, or a really warm space, Rosemary is hard to go wrong with. And I have never had trouble growing parsley. Long ago, I decided that I wanted to outcompete my weeds. I didn't want to have chickweed and that sort of stuff growing in my garden as much. And so I would let parsley go to seed, and then I would spread those seeds all over my garden. I did the same with pak choi, and after a period, I didn't really have any more weeds. I just had a lot of parsley and pak choi. If you support those sort of plants to grow well in your garden, they can actually be your weed of choice, which is a little bit of fun. The last one I wanted to suggest was radishes. Radishes actually grow well pretty much year-round in Melbourne, but starting them in spring is going to result in a quick harvest. Of all of the root vegetables you can grow, radishes are the easiest. And if you want to put something in the ground as a seed and pull out something really impressive so that your kids are really maybe into it, radish is the way to go because it's going to be ready in less than a month, about a month. And you can get all sorts of beautiful colors ranging from black to yellows to pinks to whites. So radish is a really fun, quick harvest crop that I recommend for your space. Now to wrap up, I always like to just say quickly that if you're feeling overwhelmed, the place that I want you to start when it comes to spring is going to be planting some silver beet, which is dead easy. You can't go wrong with silver beet, and I guarantee you'll eat more of it than you did when you were buying it from the store. Lettuce is another dead easy one, even for a small space. Your herbs, because you should be self-sufficient in herbs in Melbourne. I believe it very strongly. And lastly, if you want to get an impressive harvest across spring, zucchini. Zucchini is very, very easy to grow, and you're going to get lots of them. So you'll be coming up with recipes left, right, and center. Try zucchini pasta is my recommendation. If you're thinking about where to go from here, you want more tips and tricks. As I said before, we've been doing these videos for the last 2 months, so scroll back down. You can check out everything we've done on chooks, on bees, on winter gardening projects. But on top of that, there's some other resources out there that might be really interesting. A lot of the libraries that are opening up back up, and they have fantastic gardening resource books. One of my favorite gardening books that I've read over and is definitely owned by Darebin Libraries is The Urban Farmer. It was written by Justin Calver-Elliott Series, who I keep mentioning, and so it's very specific to our kind of area in Melbourne, which I like. You could also consider taking some online classes or in-person classes when they come back. And a free service is Gardenate. Gardenate is a website that you can sign up to, tell them where you live, and they will email you once or twice a month to tell you what should be going into the ground now. I find it really helpful because it helps cement in your head what time of year am I growing this particular vegetable, and is it easier to grow this from seed or as a seedling. So that's a great one to sign up for Gardenate just so you can get a reminder of when it's time to plant things. So that's about it from me, but as I said, do keep the questions coming about all of your spring and summer gardening questions. I'll endeavor to answer those ones in the comments section, as well as post some extra resources. So thanks so much for tuning in, and I hope that you go back and check out all the fun videos we have had as part of #Darebin Backyard Harvest, as well as a lot of the photos and garden inspiration we've shared on Facebook and Instagram about all things that people are growing, producing, and sharing across Darebin. So please do check those out and keep the questions coming. Bye for now.